The advertisement nailed to the trading post wall had been there for 3 weeks, its ink fading in the mountain sun, and Orson Pike had read it so many times he could recite every word from memory, even as he stood 2 days' ride away from the woman who had written it. Husband wanted. Must be strong, willing to work hard and unafraid of what neighbors might say. Cowards need not apply. Land and home provided. Inquiries to Grishka of Copper Valley. Orson folded the worn paper and tucked it back into his saddlebag as his horse picked its way down the rocky trail toward the valley below. He was 32 years old, broad-shouldered from years of logging in the northern forests, and he had never been married. Most women took one look at the scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw and found somewhere else to be. The ones who stayed long enough to hear about his past never stayed after that, but this advertisement was different. It did not promise beauty or refinement. It promised land and honesty, and it had been written by someone named Grishka, which was an orcish name. The valley opened before him as he rounded the final bend, and Orson pulled his horse to a stop. The land was beautiful, green and lush despite the late summer heat, with a clear stream running through the center. A sturdy cabin sat on a small rise, its chimney releasing a thin stream of smoke. Fields stretched to the east, planted with what looked like wheat and vegetables, all of it well tended. Whoever Grishka was, she was not lazy. As Orson urged his horse forward, he spotted a figure working in the near field. Even from a distance, he could tell she was tall and powerfully built. She wore a simple homespun dress and had her dark hair tied back with a strip of cloth. She was bent over a row of beans, her movements efficient and practiced. He rode closer, and she straightened at the sound of hoofbeats. That was when he saw her clearly for the first time. Her skin was the deep green of forest moss, and 2 small tusks curved up from her lower jaw. Her ears came to gentle points, and her eyes were a striking amber color that caught the afternoon light. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten, but he could see the wariness in her stance, the way her hands clenched at her sides. "You are here about the advertisement," she said. It was not a question. Her voice was deeper than a human woman's, with a rough quality that somehow made it more appealing. Orson dismounted, removing his hat out of respect. "I am Orson Pike. I rode from the northern settlements." 2 days, she said, and something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. "You rode 2 days to meet an orc." "I rode 2 days to meet a woman who was honest enough to say exactly what she wanted and brave enough to ask for it publicly," Orson replied. Grishka stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she gestured toward the cabin. "You should water your horse. There is a trough by the barn." The barn was small but well maintained, and Orson took his time settling his horse, giving both himself and Grishka a chance to adjust to his presence. When he emerged, she was waiting by the cabin door, her arms crossed over her chest. "Why would a human man answer such an advertisement?" she asked bluntly. "Why would an orc woman place one?" Orson countered. Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I asked first." Orson considered his words carefully. "I have worked hard all my life, but I have nothing to show for it. No land, no family, no home of my own. I am tired of moving from logging camp to logging camp, sleeping in bunkhouses with men who drink too much and fight too often. I want something permanent, something real. And you do not care that I am an orc." "I care that you have built something here," Orson said. "That takes strength and determination. Those are qualities I respect." Grishka studied him with those amber eyes, and he had the distinct impression she was seeing far more than he intended to reveal. "You are not telling me everything." "Neither are you," he replied. This time she did smile, just barely. "Come inside. You must be hungry after your journey." The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable. A large fireplace dominated one wall with a cooking pot hanging over low flames. A sturdy table and chairs occupied the center of the room, and Orson could see a sleeping area partitioned off with a heavy curtain. Everything was clean and organized, the home of someone who took pride in their space. Grishka ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table with a loaf of dark bread. They ate in silence for several minutes, and Orson was surprised by how good the food was. The meat was tender, the vegetables perfectly seasoned. "You said in the advertisement that land and home would be provided," Orson said finally. "What exactly are you offering?" 200 acres, Grishka replied. "The cabin, the barn, the fields, half the livestock and half the harvest each year. In exchange, I need someone who can help with the heavy work, plowing, repairs, hunting, and someone who will." She paused, her jaw tightening. "Someone who will make it clear to anyone who asks that this land has a human protector." There it was, the real reason for the advertisement. "People have been giving you trouble," Orson said quietly. "The town of Millbrook is 5 miles east. For the first year I was here, they left me alone. Then last spring, a group of men came and said I was not welcome. They said orcs were not meant to own land, that I should go back to my clan in the mountains." Her hands clenched around her spoon. "I refused. They burned my first wheat crop, poisoned my well, killed my dog." Anger flared hot in Orson's chest, and the law did nothing. "The sheriff said there was no proof. He said perhaps I should consider their advice and leave." Grishka's voice was flat, emotionless, but Orson could see the pain in her eyes. "I will not leave. My parents died to buy this land. I will not surrender it to cowards who hide behind prejudice." "Your parents," my father was human. My mother was orc. They were not welcome in either world, so they came here to the frontier and they built this farm from nothing. Grishka stared down at her bowl. "They died 3 years ago during the harsh winter. I have been alone since then." Orson felt something shift in his chest. He understood loneliness. He understood not belonging. "If I stay," he said slowly, "those men will not stop just because a human lives here now. They will see it as a betrayal. They may come after both of us." "I know. I have fought before," Orson continued. "During the border wars, I served as a scout. I have killed men. I do not enjoy it, but I will do it to protect what is mine." Grishka looked up, meeting his eyes. "What is yours? If I agree to this arrangement, then this farm becomes mine too. And so do you in a way. Not as property," he added quickly, seeing her expression shift. "As a partner, someone I am bound to protect." "The advertisement said husband wanted," Grishka said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not farmhand, not protector, husband. I know what it said." "Do you understand what that means? We would have to present ourselves as married. You would have to." She hesitated. "You would have to act as though you care for me, as though we chose each other." "Who says it would be an act?" Orson asked. Grishka stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. She moved to the fireplace, her back to him. "You do not know me." "Not yet," Orson agreed, "but I would like to." "Why?" The word burst out of her like a wound opening. "Why would you want to know me? I am half orc." "I am too tall, too strong, too different. Human women are soft and delicate and beautiful. I am none of those things." Orson rose and crossed to her slowly, giving her time to tell him to stop. She did not. "You are wrong about that last part." She turned, and he saw tears glistening in her eyes. It made her seem younger, more vulnerable. "Do not lie to me. I have had enough of lies." "I am not lying," Orson said. "When I first saw you in the field, my first thought was that you were beautiful. My second thought was that I had no right to think such a thing. My third thought was that I did not care." "You are a fool," she whispered. "Probably," he agreed. But I am an honest fool, and I am here, and unless you tell me to leave, I intend to stay." Grishka searched his face, and whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. She nodded slowly. "There is a spare room. You can sleep there tonight. In the morning, we will discuss the details of our arrangement." That night, Orson lay awake in the small bedroom off the main room, listening to the sounds of the cabin settling around him. He had made impulsive decisions before, but this felt different. This felt right in a way he could not quite explain. In the morning, he woke to the smell of frying bacon and fresh bread. Grishka was already up, dressed in sturdy work clothes, her hair braided down her back. She looked at him with something approaching shyness. "I thought we should go to Millbrook today," she said. "Make it known that things have changed." Orson nodded, understanding the wisdom of establishing his presence quickly. "Give me a few minutes to make myself presentable." They hitched Grishka's wagon and drove the 5 miles to town in companionable silence. Millbrook was larger than Orson had expected, with a proper main street and at least 20 buildings. People stopped and stared as they passed, their eyes widening when they recognized Grishka. They pulled up in front of the general store, and Orson hopped down, then offered Grishka his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it, and he helped her down from the wagon. Several people nearby whispered to each other. Inside the store, a thin man with graying hair looked up from behind the counter. His expression went from welcoming to cold in an instant when he saw Grishka. "We do not serve your kind here," he said. "Then it is fortunate I am here to shop," Orson replied evenly. "My wife needs fabric and thread. I need ammunition and salt." The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed. "Your wife? That is correct." Orson kept his voice pleasant but firm. "We were married last week. I have taken over management of the Copper Valley farm." It was a lie, but a necessary one. They could make it true later if they chose. The shopkeeper looked between them, clearly trying to decide if Orson was serious. "I do not know you." "Orson Pike. I served in the Northern Border Wars under Captain Harris. Before that, I logged in the high country. I have been working my way south for the past 2 years, looking for land to settle. When I met Grishka, I knew I had found what I was looking for." Grishka's hand tightened on his arm, but she said nothing. "This is unnatural," the shopkeeper said, his voice rising. "Humans and orcs were not meant to mix. And yet here we are, mixing just fine." Orson's patience was wearing thin. "Now, will you sell us what we need, or should we take our business to the next town?" The shopkeeper's mouth worked silently for a moment. Then, clearly calculating the loss of revenue, he nodded stiffly. "I will sell to you, but the orc stays by the door." "My wife stays with me," Orson said flatly. "Or we leave." It was a standoff, and Orson could feel the tension vibrating through Grishka's arm. Finally, the shopkeeper threw up his hands. "Fine, but be quick about it." They took their time, selecting fabric in a cheerful blue that made Grishka's eyes light up, thread in several colors, ammunition for Orson's rifle, salt, sugar, and several other supplies. Orson paid with silver coins and did not flinch at the inflated prices. As they loaded the wagon, a group of 3 men emerged from the saloon across the street. The largest one, a bull-necked man with a thick beard, called out, "Pike, that your name?" Orson turned slowly. "It is." "Heard you claim to have married the orc." "I did not claim anything. I stated a fact." The man spat in the dust. "No real man would debase himself that way. You must be desperate or crazy or both." Orson felt his temper flare, but he kept his voice level. "What I am is uninterested in your opinion. Now, if you will excuse us, we have work to do." He helped Grishka onto the wagon seat and climbed up beside her. As they pulled away, he heard one of the men shout something obscene, but he did not look back. Grishka was silent until they were well out of town. Then she said, You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. They will make trouble for you now, for both of us. They were already making trouble for you, Orson pointed out. At least now you are not facing it alone. She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw something shift in her expression. You meant it, what you said about being married. I said we were married last week. That was a lie, but only in timing. Orson kept his eyes on the road. If you will have me, Grishka, I would like to make it true. Not just for convenience, but because I think we could build something good together. You have known me for less than a day, I know. But I have learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts say you are someone worth knowing, worth fighting for. He paused. Am I wrong? No, she whispered. You are not wrong. They spent the rest of the ride in silence, but it was a comfortable silence now, full of possibility. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Orson threw himself into the work of the farm with an energy that seemed to surprise Grishka. He repaired the barn roof, reinforced the well, and helped her harvest the last of the summer vegetables. In the evenings, they sat together by the fire, talking about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Orson learned that Grishka's mother had been cast out of her clan for loving a human, and that her father had been disowned by his family for the same reason. They had struggled for years before finally scraping together enough money to buy this land. Grishka had been raised on the farm, learning both human and orcish traditions, belonging fully to neither. Grishka learned that Orson had grown up in an orphanage after his parents died of fever. He had joined the army at 16, desperate for a purpose, and had spent 5 years fighting in the border skirmishes against raiders from the eastern mountains. He had left the army after being wounded, the injury leaving him with the scar on his face and a limp that only appeared when he was tired. He had drifted for years afterward, working wherever he could, never staying long enough to put down roots. I was afraid, he admitted one night. Afraid that if I stayed somewhere I would care about it and then I would lose it, like I lost everything else. Grishka reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. Her palm was warm and calloused from work. I understand that fear. I know you do, Orson said. That is why I think we fit together. She smiled, and it transformed her face. I am beginning to think you may be right. That night, as Orson lay in his room, he heard her moving around in the main room. He got up and found her standing by the window, looking out at the moonlit fields. Cannot sleep, he asked. She shook her head. I keep thinking about Millbrook, about what will happen when they realize you are serious about staying. They will learn to accept it, or they will escalate. Grishka turned to face him. I would not blame you if you changed your mind. If you decided this was too much trouble. Orson crossed to her and took both her hands in his. I am not going anywhere. I told you I would stay, and I meant it. Why? The question was almost desperate. Why would you risk so much for someone like me? Because, Orson said, pulling her closer, someone like you is exactly what I have been searching for all my life. Someone strong and honest and brave. Someone who knows what it means to fight for what matters. Grishka's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I am afraid. So am I, Orson admitted. But I would rather be afraid with you than safe and alone. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was tentative at first, as if she expected him to pull away, but when he responded by wrapping his arms around her, she deepened the kiss. Her tusks made it different from kissing a human woman, but not in a bad way, just different. Just her. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. We should make it official, Grishka said. The marriage. If we are going to claim it, we should do it properly. Agreed, Orson said, but not in Millbrook, somewhere neutral. There is a circuit judge who comes through Cooper's Crossing once a month. That is a 2-day ride west near the border. They are more accepting of mixed couples there. Then we will go to Cooper's Crossing. They made the journey 3 days later. taking the wagon and camping one night under the stars. Orson had expected awkwardness, but instead found a natural ease with Grishka. They talked and laughed and sat in comfortable silence, and when she fell asleep against his shoulder by the fire, he felt a contentment he had never known before. Cooper's Crossing was smaller than Millbrook but far more diverse. Orson saw humans, orcs, dwarves, and even a few elves moving through the streets. No one gave them a second glance. The judge was a middle-aged human woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to their request and nodded. "I will need 2 witnesses." They found a pair of merchants willing to stand for them, and the ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the judge pronounced them married, Orson slipped a simple iron band onto Grishka's finger. He had bought it from a blacksmith in Cooper's Crossing that morning, using most of his remaining coin. Grishka stared at the ring, then at him. "You did not have to do this." "I wanted to," Orson said. "You are my wife now, truly." She kissed him there in front of the judge and the witnesses, and Orson felt like his heart might burst from his chest. They stayed in Cooper's Crossing that night, renting a room at a small inn. It was their wedding night, and Orson was nervous in a way he had not been since his first battle. But Grishka was gentle with him, and he was gentle with her, and they learned each other slowly, carefully, with patience and growing passion. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Grishka traced the scar on his face with one finger. "How did you get this?" "A raider's knife," Orson said. "During a night ambush, I was lucky it did not take my eye." "It does not make you less handsome," she said seriously. Orson laughed. "I was never handsome to begin with." "You are to me," Grishka said, and the simple honesty in her voice made his throat tight. "You are beautiful to me," he replied. "All of you. Your strength, your courage, your green skin, and your tusks and your amber eyes. All of it." She buried her face against his chest, and he felt the dampness of tears. "I never thought anyone would say such things to me." "Get used to it," Orson said, holding her tighter. "I plan to say them often." They returned to Copper Valley 3 days later, and Orson began to think of the farm as home. He worked from dawn to dusk, preparing for winter, and Grishka worked beside him. They were a good team, anticipating each other's needs, moving in sync like they had been doing this for years instead of weeks. The trouble came on a cool evening in late September. Orson was in the barn, checking on the cow that was due to calf soon, when he heard Grishka shout. He grabbed his rifle and ran outside to find 5 men on horseback surrounding her in the yard. The bull-necked man from Millbrook was at their head. "You need to leave," the man was saying. "This is your last warning." "This is my land," Grishka said, her voice steady despite the fear Orson could see in her eyes. "I am not going anywhere." "Then you will be removed," the man said. He gestured to his companions. "Burn the cabin." "I would not do that," Orson called out, stepping into the open with his rifle raised. All 5 men turned to look at him. The leader sneered. "The orc's pet human. You should have stayed in Millbrook, Pike. Should have taken our advice and left this creature alone." "She is my wife," Orson said calmly, "and you are trespassing on our property. I suggest you leave before someone gets hurt." "You are outnumbered, fool." "Maybe," Orson said, "but I am a very good shot, and I guarantee I can drop at least 3 of you before you reach me." "The question is, which 3? He let his gaze move slowly across the group. "You there with the red scarf, you are the easiest target, and you on the gray horse, you are sitting too high. You will be second. As for the 3rd, he paused. "Well, it is hard to say." "Maybe it will be you," he said, looking at the leader. The men shifted uneasily in their saddles. The leader's face reddened. "You are bluffing." "Am I?" Orson's voice went cold. "I killed 17 men during the border wars. I have the nightmares to prove it." Killing 5 more will not cost me much sleep, especially when they are threatening my wife and my home. There are laws against murder, one of the other men said nervously. There are also laws against arson and trespassing and assault, Orson replied, but you do not seem worried about those. Now I am going to count to 10. If you are still here when I reach 10, I start shooting. 1. The men looked at each other. 2. This is not over, the leader growled. 3. The men began backing their horses away. 4. We will come back with more men, the leader threatened. 5. Then I will shoot more men, Orson said. 6. The leader wheeled his horse around and spurred it into a gallop. His companions followed, and in moments they were disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust. Orson lowered his rifle and turned to Grishka. She was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself. "Are you hurt?" he asked, dropping the rifle and pulling her into his arms. "No," she managed, "but Orson, they meant it, they will come back." "I know." Orson held her close, feeling her heart racing against his chest. "We need to be prepared." Over the next week, they turned the farm into a fortress. Orson built shutters for the windows that could be barred from inside. He cleared the brush around the cabin to give them clear sightlines. He set up a cache of ammunition and supplies in the barn in case they needed to retreat there. Grishka worked beside him, her jaw set with determination. "We could leave," she said one evening as they worked on the defenses. "Go somewhere else, start over." "Is that what you want?" Orson asked. She was quiet for a long moment. "No, this is my home, my parents' legacy. I will not abandon it." "Then we stay," Orson said, "and we fight if we have to." The attack came 2 weeks later in the dead of night. Orson woke to the sound of breaking glass and sat up, instantly alert. "Grishka," she was already moving, pulling on her boots. "The barn, they are trying to burn it." Orson grabbed his rifle and pistol and they ran outside together. Flames were already licking up the side of the barn and he could see figures moving in the darkness. More than 5 this time, at least a dozen. "Get to the well," Orson shouted. "Start filling buckets." Grishka ran and Orson fired a shot into the air. "This is your only warning. Leave now or I will shoot to kill." Someone fired back and the bullet whined past his ear. That decided it. Orson took aim and fired, and one of the figures dropped with a scream. He fired again and another went down. The attackers scattered, looking for cover, but Orson had cleared the area around the cabin specifically to prevent that. Grishka appeared with a bucket of water and threw it on the flames. The fire was spreading fast, but it had not yet reached the interior of the barn. If they could contain it, they might save the structure. "Keep dousing the flames," Orson called. "I will keep them back." He reloaded and fired steadily, not aiming to kill now, just to keep the attackers pinned down. They returned fire, but their aim was poor in the darkness, and Orson had the advantage of position and preparation. The battle lasted nearly an hour. By the end, 2 of the attackers were dead, several more wounded, and the rest had fled. The barn was damaged but still standing. Orson and Grishka had put out the fire before it could spread to the stored hay and the animals. They stood together in the yard, covered in soot and ash, watching the eastern sky lighten with the approaching dawn. "We killed people," Grishka said quietly. "On our own land in defense of our home, but still." "I know," Orson said. His hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. "I know." "What do we do now?" We report it to the sheriff, and we make it clear that we will defend ourselves if attacked again. The sheriff, when he arrived later that morning with a deputy, seemed more annoyed than concerned. He examined the bodies, questioned Orson and Grishka, and finally declared it a case of self-defense. "Though I will say," he added, looking at Orson with something like distaste, "you have made things very complicated. These men have families, friends. There will be consequences." "There were already consequences," Orson said tiredly. We tried to live peacefully. They would not let us. The sheriff left, taking the bodies with him, and Orson and Grishka were alone once more. They spent the rest of the day repairing the damage and tending to their animals. The cow had gone into labor during the chaos, and Grishka delivered a healthy calf while Orson kept watch. It felt like a small miracle, new life in the midst of so much death. That night, exhausted and emotionally drained, they collapsed into bed together. "I am sorry," Grishka whispered in the darkness. "This is my fault. If you had not married me, none of this would have happened." Orson rolled over to face her, cupping her cheek with his hand. "If I had not married you, I would still be drifting, alone and purposeless. You gave me a home, Grishka. You gave me a reason to fight. I would not trade that for anything." "Even if it costs you your life, even then," Orson said. "Though I plan to live for a very long time. We both do. We have a farm to run, after all." Grishka kissed him, deep and desperate, and they made love with an intensity born of fear and relief and stubborn hope. The weeks that followed were tense but quiet. No more attacks came, though Orson remained vigilant. Word must have spread about what had happened, about the cost of attacking the farm. Or perhaps the people of Millbrook had simply decided they had bigger problems than one orc woman and her human husband. Winter came early that year, and Orson and Grishka spent long evenings by the fire, planning for spring. They talked about expanding the fields, buying more livestock, maybe even building a larger barn. "We could have children," Grishka said one night hesitantly, "if you wanted. Half-orcs are rare but possible." Orson looked at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. "Do you want children?" "I think so," she said. "Someday, when things are more settled, when we know we can keep them safe." "Then we will have children," Orson said, "as many as you want." She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I love you, Orson Pike." It was the first time she had said it, and the words hit him with unexpected force. "I love you too," he managed. "More than I knew it was possible to love anyone." They held each other as snow began to fall outside, the first real snow of the season, and Orson felt at peace for the first time in his adult life. Spring came, and with it, cautious overtures from some of their neighbors. A farmer from the next valley stopped by to trade seed. A woman from a homestead to the south brought a basket of preserves and asked if Grishka would teach her how to make the cheese Orson had mentioned at the general store. Slowly, carefully, they began to build connections. Not with everyone, and certainly not with the people of Millbrook, but with enough folks that they no longer felt completely isolated. Orson expanded the fields and bought 3 more cows. Grishka started a vegetable garden that quickly became the envy of the region. They worked hard, but they also made time for each other, for long walks in the evening and lazy mornings in bed when the work allowed. In late summer, Grishka told him she was pregnant. Orson picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," she said, grinning. "The midwife in Cooper's Crossing confirmed it. We will have a baby by early spring." That winter was the happiest of Orson's life. Despite the cold and the hard work of keeping the farm running, he felt a contentment that was almost overwhelming. Grishka bloomed with pregnancy, her strength seemingly doubled, her beauty even more striking. "I am enormous," she complained one evening, looking down at her swollen belly. "You are magnificent," Orson corrected, kissing her forehead. "You are carrying our child." "There is nothing more beautiful than that." The baby came in March, during a late-season snowstorm. The midwife could not make it through the drifts, so Orson delivered his own child, guided by Grishka's instructions and his own shaking hands. It was a boy, small but healthy, with Grishka's green skin and Orson's blue eyes. He had tiny tusks already visible and pointed ears, a perfect blend of both his parents. "What should we name him?" Grishka asked, exhausted but radiant as she held their son. "Whatever you want," Orson said, unable to look away from the baby. "I want you to choose," Grishka said. "He is as much yours as mine." Orson thought for a moment. "Owen, for new beginnings." "Owen Pike," Grishka said, testing the name. "I like it." Over the next months, they adjusted to life as parents. It was harder than either had anticipated, the sleepless nights and constant worry, but it was also indescribably rewarding. Owen was a happy baby, quick to smile, and watching him grow felt like watching a miracle unfold. When summer came and the fields were planted, Orson built a larger house. The cabin had served them well, but with a child and possibly more to come, they needed more space. He worked on it in the evenings and on days when the weather was too bad for field work, and by autumn, it was complete. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a large living area. It was the finest house in the valley, and Orson felt a fierce pride every time he looked at it. They moved in just before Owen's first birthday, and Grishka stood in the empty living room, tears streaming down her face. "My parents would have loved this," she said. "They would have been so proud." "They would have been proud of you regardless," Orson said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You took what they built and made it even better. You created a home, a family, a legacy." "We created it," Grishka corrected. "Together." That winter, 3 families from the surrounding area came to visit, bringing gifts for Owen and compliments on the new house. It was a small thing, but it represented a shift. They were no longer pariahs, they were neighbors. The people of Millbrook still gave them a wide berth, but Orson did not care. They had found acceptance elsewhere, and that was enough. Years passed. Owen grew into a bright, curious child who loved helping in the fields and hearing stories about both human and orcish traditions. Grishka gave birth to twin girls when Owen was 4, and Orson nearly passed out from the shock of it. The girls, Anna and Aria, had their mother's amber eyes and their father's brown hair, and they were as different from each other as night and day. Anna was quiet and thoughtful, while Aria was loud and adventurous. The farm prospered. Orson and Grishka hired help during the harvest seasons, providing work for several families in the area. They became known for their fairness and generosity, and more than once, Orson saw young mixed-race couples looking at their farm with hopeful eyes. On their 10th anniversary, Orson commissioned a sign for the entrance to their property. It read simply, "Pike Farm, ESD, Year of the Twin Moons. All welcome." Grishka cried when she saw it, and Orson held her as she did, understanding without words what it meant to her. They had built something that would outlast them, a place of safety and acceptance, a home. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their house watching their children play in the yard, Grishka leaned her head on Orson's shoulder. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Answering that advertisement, taking on all of this?" Orson thought about the question seriously. He thought about the attacks, the prejudice, the fear. He thought about the hard work and the sleepless nights and the constant worry. Then he looked at his wife, still as beautiful to him as the first day he saw her. He looked at his children, healthy and happy and loved. He looked at the land they had cultivated together, the house they had built, the life they had created from nothing but determination and hope. "Not for a single moment," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "You rode 2 days to meet an orc," Grishka said, echoing the words from that first day. "I rode 2 days to meet my future," Orson corrected, "and I would ride twice as far to do it again." She kissed him then, and it was like coming home all over again. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Owen grew tall and strong, inheriting his mother's work ethic and his father's sense of justice. The twins developed their own interests, Anna in healing and herb lore, area in blacksmithing and metalwork. When Owen was 16, he asked to court a human girl from Cooper's Crossing, and Orson saw the worry in Grishka's eyes. "What if she rejects him?" she whispered that night. "What if people are cruel to him?" "Then he will learn to handle it," Orson said gently, "the same way we did. And he will know that he always has a home here with us, where he is loved and accepted exactly as he is." The girl, as it turned out, was smitten with Owen and had been for months. Her parents were initially hesitant, but after meeting Orson and Grishka, after seeing the farm and understanding what they had built, they gave their blessing. It was a sign of how far things had changed. Not everywhere, and not for everyone, but in their corner of the frontier at least, love was beginning to matter more than bloodlines. Orson and Grishka became grandparents when Owen was 22, and the sight of Grishka holding her granddaughter for the first time made Orson's throat tight with emotion. The baby was mostly human in appearance, with just a hint of green in her skin and slightly pointed ears. She was perfect. The twins married as well, Anna to an elf scholar and Arya to a human soldier. Both weddings were held at the farm, and both were joyous occasions filled with music and laughter and dancing that lasted until dawn. On the night of Arya's wedding, as Orson and Grishka danced together under strings of lanterns, she said, "We did it. We actually did it." "Did what?" Orson asked, though he knew. "Built a family. A real family that loves each other and accepts each other and chooses to be together." She looked around at their children and grandchildren and friends. "My parents dreamed of this, but they never got to see it. I wish they had." "They see it," Orson said with conviction. "Wherever they are, they see it, and they are proud." As Orson grew older, he sometimes thought about that advertisement, faded and worn, that had changed his life. He had kept it all these years, tucked away in a drawer, and sometimes he would take it out and read it. Husband wanted. Must be strong, willing to work hard and unafraid of what neighbors might say. Cowards need not apply. He had been all those things, or at least he had tried to be, but Grishka had been more. She had been brave when bravery cost everything. She had been stubborn when stubbornness was the only thing standing between her and despair. She had been loving when the world told her she did not deserve love. One winter evening, when they were both well into their 60s, Orson and Grishka sat by the fire in their living room. Their children were grown and gone, building their own lives, but they visited often. The house was quiet now in a way it had not been for decades. "You think we made a difference?" Grishka asked suddenly. Orson looked at her, seeing the silver in her dark hair, the lines around her eyes. She was still beautiful to him. She would always be beautiful to him. "What do you mean? You think things are better now, for people like us, like our children? Or did we just carve out one small safe space in a world that has not really changed?" Orson considered the question. "I think we showed people that it was possible. That a human and an orc could build a life together, raise a family, be happy. And every person who sees that, every person who comes to accept it, is one more person who might accept the next mixed couple they meet. Change does not happen all at once. It happens one person, one family, one generation at a time." "That is a very optimistic view," Grishka said, but she was smiling. "I am an optimist," Orson said. "I have to be. I married an orc woman I had known for less than a day after all." Grishka laughed, the sound as warm and rich as it had been 30 years ago. "You were either an optimist or a fool." "Both," Orson agreed. "Definitely both." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn low. Then Grishka said, "I am glad you answered my advertisement." "So am I," Orson said. "So am I." In the spring of his 70th year, Orson fell ill. It started as a cough, nothing serious, but it settled in his lungs and would not leave. The healer from Cooper's Crossing came and did what she could, but they all knew the truth. Time was running out. Grishka refused to leave his side. She sat with him day and night, holding his hand, telling him stories, reminding him of all the good years they had shared. "I am not ready," she said one night, her voice breaking. "I am not ready to lose you." "I know," Orson said, his voice weak but steady. "But Grishka, my love, you are so strong. You were strong before you met me, and you will be strong after I am gone." "I do not want to be strong," she said fiercely. "I want you to stay." "I wish I could," Orson said, "but I need you to promise me something. Anything, keep the farm going. Keep our family together. Keep showing the world that love matters more than prejudice." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Promise me." "I promise," Grishka whispered. Orson died 3 days later, surrounded by his wife and children and grandchildren. His last words were, "I love you, Grishka, always." The funeral was held at the farm, and people came from miles around to pay their respects. The man who had once been a drifter, who had answered an advertisement on a whim, had touched more lives than he ever knew. Grishka grieved deeply, but she kept her promise. She ran the farm with the help of Owen and his family, who moved back to the homestead. She spent time with her grandchildren, teaching them about their heritage, both human and orc. She lived for another 15 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born and to know that the legacy she and Orson had built would continue. On the day she died, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83, she was buried next to Orson on a hill overlooking the farm. Their children commissioned a single headstone that read, "Orson Pike and Grishka Pike. Beloved partners, parents, grandparents. They built a home where all were welcome. They proved that love conquers fear." The farm remained in the family for generations. It became a landmark, a symbol of acceptance and perseverance. Young couples, especially those facing prejudice for their mixed heritage, would sometimes make pilgrimages to see it, to stand where Orson and Grishka had stood and to find hope in their story. The advertisement, yellowed and fragile, was eventually framed and hung in the farmhouse. Visitors would read it and marvel at how much had grown from such a simple beginning. Husband wanted, must be strong, willing to work hard and unafraid of what neighbors might say. Cowards need not apply. And Orson Pike, who had been strong enough to love when love was dangerous, who had worked hard to build a life worth living, and who had never been afraid to stand by the woman he loved, had answered that call and changed the world. Not the whole world, perhaps, but his world. Their world. And in the end, that was enough. The story of Orson and Grishka became the stuff of local legend, passed down through generations. Parents told their children about the mountain man who rode 2 days to meet an orc woman and found a love that defied all odds. Teachers used their example to talk about courage and acceptance. Historians noted them as pioneers of interspecies relations in the frontier territories. But for those who actually knew them, who had seen them working side by side in the fields or dancing together at harvest festivals, or simply sitting on their porch watching the sunset, the story was simpler and more profound. It was the story of 2 lonely people who found each other and refused to let the world tear them apart. It was the story of home and family and stubborn, enduring love. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across Copper Valley, some swore they could still hear laughter coming from the old Pike farmhouse, the sound of 2 souls who had found their peace and their purpose in each other's arms. The farm itself continued to thrive under the care of the Pike descendants. Owen's son, who bore his grandfather's name, expanded it even further, adding orchards and a mill. The Pike family became known as fair employers and good neighbors, always willing to help those in need regardless of their race or background. The house that Orson built stood for over a century before it needed major renovations. And even then, the family was careful to preserve its original character. The porch where Orson and Grishka had spent so many evenings was maintained exactly as it had been, and family gatherings always included a toast to the couple who had started it all. In time, the prejudices that had once made their love so dangerous began to fade. Mixed marriages became more common, more accepted. The people of Millbrook, or at least their descendants, eventually acknowledged that they had been wrong about the Pikes. A formal apology was issued by the town council over 100 years after the attacks, and a memorial was erected to honor those who had died defending their right to love freely. But the real memorial was not made of stone. It was the thriving farm, the sprawling family, the countless lives touched by the example Orson and Grishka had set. It was every young person who looked at their story and thought, if they could overcome so much, maybe I can too. It was the legacy of courage, of choosing love over fear, of building rather than destroying. And it all started with a simple advertisement, and a man brave enough to answer it, riding 2 days through the mountains to meet a woman he had never seen, trusting in possibility rather than probability, in hope rather than certainty. In the end, that leap of faith had created something beautiful and lasting, something that would endure long after both of them were gone. And really, what more could any love story ask for than that?